A new law promises protection for more people hoping to make Taiwan their home. Taiwan should pay the U.S. for protection, says former U.S. President Donald Trump. Several foreign nationals have been found poisoned in a Bangkok hotel, and police are calling it a murder-suicide. Plus, the revival of an indigenous tattooing tradition. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Thanks for joining us. A new law expanding the definition of who can be classified as a new immigrant passed Taiwan's legislature on Tuesday. It promises a wave of new resources and services for foreigners in Taiwan, but it falls short of full inclusion. Our reporter Reese Ayers joins us live in Taipei. Reese, can you tell us what this new law means for foreigners here in Taiwan?
Yeah, well, it's good news for those who are in Taiwan or looking to come here. A lot of new resources to help them integrate if they choose to work or settle down in the country. And it's a big bill, passed close to midnight on Tuesday night and voted through by the Kuomintang, who are the opposition party that hold a majority in the legislature, and supported by the Third Taiwan People's Party. Let's take a look at what's included in the bill. There'll be a new government agency set up to handle all issues concerning immigrants in Taiwan. There'll be family service centers, which will provide counseling and family planning, life adjustment services. There'll be language programs, employment services, and just generally a greater push for more cultural integration into Taiwanese society. Now, the aim of this bill is to make Taiwan a more multicultural society and also to try and bring more immigrants into the country. Taiwan currently, only about 2.5% of the population are classed as new immigrants. And with an aging society and also a declining population, right now, Taiwan really needs the bodies.
Now, Reese, although the bill does mean that many more foreigners living here in Taiwan, they'll get access to these resources, there's one particular group of immigrants that are still being left out.
That's right, Eric. While some lawmakers are lauding this bill as being inclusionary, there's actually quite a big hole. Let's take a look at who's included and who's not. Now, the new immigrants will be foreign spouses, there'll be the children of immigrants, it will be skilled and white-collar workers, stateless people, foreigners who invest in Taiwan, but quite notably, it will exclude blue-collar migrant workers. Now, there are over 700,000 of those in Taiwan, mostly from Southeast Asian countries, and they've been completely left out of this bill. They actually operate in Taiwan on quite unique visas, which are more limiting than the visas that you might expect to be on if you're a skilled white-collar worker, and their path to citizenship or residency is much more difficult. Now, earlier today, I spoke to an NGO who advocates for immigrants in Taiwan, and they've been part of a movement that have been pushing for those blue-collar migrant workers to be included in this bill.
因为同样都是移工，但是却纳入了白领技术的经济型的人力，但是排除了就是像现在在台湾辛苦的做家庭看护以及公共工程或者是产业的蓝领的移工呢，如果说是一种种族歧视的话呢，我觉得倒不如形容它其实是一种阶级的歧视。当然我们当时在提出这个条文的诉求的时候呢，是觉得就是蓝领移工目前在台湾的保障还非常的不足。那法虽然通过了，但是我在想说民间团体仍然会努力就是去盘点相关的法令。
This kind of exclusion for blue-collar migrant workers isn't unique to Taiwan, but given how much some of these Southeast Asian workers have contributed to Taiwanese society, including by helping to build a lot of Taiwan's core infrastructure, and based on how long some of them have been here, sometimes up to 12 years, advocates for migrant workers argue that they deserve greater legal protections.
Thanks for that update, Reese. That was Reese Ayers reporting live from Taipei about expanded laws for new immigrants here in Taiwan. President Lai Ching-te says he won't address the legislature until amendments requiring him to do so are ruled to be constitutional. President Lai was invited to deliver the address under recent reforms that expand the legislature's oversight powers. Lai signed those reforms into law last month after they were pushed through the opposition-controlled legislature. Taiwan's constitutional court is now reviewing those rules, and Lai's office says that he will wait for its decision before accepting the invitation. The Taipei court has handed out prison sentences to a local businessman and one of his informants for spying for China. Fang Xiang has been given nearly 5.5 years for spying on Taiwanese and Tibetan independence activists in Taiwan. Fang, who lived in China, recruited informants from activist groups by buying them trips. One of his informants, an officer at the Culture Ministry's Mongolian and Tibetan Center, has been given 3.5 years in prison. China and the Philippines have agreed to set up high-level hotlines to prevent tensions in the South China Sea from escalating. The presidential offices and foreign ministries of the two countries can now communicate directly if more incidents occur in the disputed waters. China lays claim to the whole of the South China Sea, while the Philippines considers parts of the waters as its territory. In recent months, the Chinese Coast Guard has used water cannons and other intimidation tactics to target the Philippines Coast Guard near the Second Thomas Shoal. Former U.S. President and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump says that Taiwan should pay the U.S. for defense. Trump made the comments in an interview with Bloomberg Businessweek. He blamed Taiwan for stealing the U.S.'s semiconductor business and said U.S. support for Taiwan amounts to what he called an insurance policy for the country. The comments are similar to those that he has made about other U.S. partners and allies. Trump has said that countries need to put up more money in exchange for security and defense support from the U.S. Now, that position is also backed by his new running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who opposes providing more aid to Ukraine in its war against Russia. For more on how the U.S. Republican Party ticket views the relationship with Taiwan and other East Asian partners, Jeremy Olivier spoke with Taipei-based political risk analyst and the former chair of Republicans Abroad Asia, Ross Feingold.
In a recent interview with Bloomberg Businessweek, former President Trump indicated that Taiwan would need to pay more for U.S. protection if he were elected president again. What does he mean by that, especially given that Taiwan currently does pay for U.S. weapons?
I think the point he really wanted to make is that Taiwan should be investing more in its own defense. And that's something that many commentators, including myself, have repeatedly said for many, many years, that Taiwan's military spending, no matter how you calculate it, whether as a percentage of GDP or national income, or whether as a percentage of the central government budget, it's simply not enough. It's insufficient for the threat that Taiwan faces from China. And if we look back at Trump's first 4 years, his original term as president, and how he dealt with fellow NATO members, or how he dealt with Japan, or how he dealt with South Korea, he was very direct with those countries and very direct in demanding that they spend more on their national defense. And frankly, they did.
We know that Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance doesn't support the level of aid that the U.S. is currently providing to Ukraine. So what are his thoughts on the U.S.'s stance in Asia? And has he said anything publicly about the situation in the Taiwan Strait?
In fact, Senator Vance has been clear that he does favor providing more military assistance to Taiwan. He does view the Indo-Pacific region as really the key place where the United States should be building up its military, and he's been very critical of China. So in this regard, where he's skeptical of aid to Ukraine, but favors more aid to Taiwan and to the Indo-Pacific region, he's certainly not unique among U.S. congressmen, whether in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, and specifically among Republicans. There is a group of Republicans who oppose more aid to Ukraine. They certainly oppose it at the level that was recently passed earlier this year, the $60 billion aid package for Ukraine. But generally, many of these Republicans who oppose the aid package for Ukraine, they do favor more aid to Taiwan and a military buildup in the Indo-Pacific to confront China.
For the first time in 40 years, Taiwan was left out of the most recent Republican policy platform. What does this indicate? And do you think the Republican Party is moving away from its firm support of Taiwan?
I don't think the omission of Taiwan from the platform indicates in any way that the Republican Party is moving away from its support for Taiwan. The platform was much slimmed down compared to past platforms, and most notably in the foreign policy space, typically the Republican platform would make mention of not only Taiwan, but other close partners of the United States, whether NATO or Japan or South Korea. And this year, all those references to allies were removed.
That was political risk analyst Ross Feingold speaking with our reporter Jeremy Olivier. Taiwan is preparing for its largest annual military drills, the Hanguang exercise. This year, reservists and combat troops will conduct joint drills as the military strengthens the country's combat readiness. Wesley Lewis reports.
These military reservists in southern Taiwan are practicing their shooting ahead of the country's largest military drills, the Hanguang exercise. The reservists say this year is all about picking up some new skills.
长官的指导，我们都是还有记忆，快速的这个射击是我第一次来做这个训练。那当然，在这个过程当中非常的新鲜新奇。
Reservists have been training outdoors at a shooting range at Shishu Beach, which the military says is particularly vulnerable to a sea invasion. Here, the reservists can experience battlefield conditions.
针对应招员来做实战化的射击训练，实地的地形及地物，然后让我们的招员来熟悉这些地貌以利在届时的作战场景能够更融入。
These reservists will train here for 2 weeks, including taking part in joint drills with combat troops during the Hanguang exercise that starts next week. The military will also be holding its annual Wan'an air defense drill alongside the Hanguang exercise. With drills being held in central Taiwan on the 22nd, northern Taiwan on the 23rd, eastern Taiwan and outlying islands on the 24th, and southern Taiwan on the 25th. Defense analysts say the public should know what to do in the event of a missile attack.
让一般的民众对共军假设他们飞弹来袭有一定程度的了解这个是不错的，因为其实各国都在做不管是韩国或说以色列，他们都在做。
In the days leading up to the Hanguang exercise, the military has also been conducting offshore missile tests in southern Taiwan. And with the country's biggest military drills fast approaching, all hands are on deck to ensure Taiwan's combat readiness. Andy Xue and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
6 people have been found dead in a luxury hotel room in Thailand. Police say that they were poisoned and that one of the 6 is responsible. Ro Hughes reports.
A luxury hotel in Bangkok, now at the center of a crime scene. 6 foreign nationals were found dead inside one of the hotel rooms. The door locked from the inside, with no signs of a struggle. Their room service left untouched on the table. An autopsy reveals they had been poisoned. And police believe one of the 6 is responsible.
คุณภาพพบว่าเป็นสารไซยาไนด์นะครับอยู่ที่ของเหลวในกาน้ำชานะครับอยู่ที่คราบที่ติดอยู่ถ้วยกาแฟทั้ง6ถ้วยนะครับแล้วก็รับทราบจากที่เราเก็บตัวอย่างเลือดจากผู้ชายที่เสียชีวิตศพที่เสียชีวิตที่นั่งพิงกำแพงอยู่ก็พบว่าเลือดมีส่วนผสมของไซยาไนด์นะครับ
The 3 men and 3 women were all Vietnamese nationals. 2 had dual American citizenship. They were found by housekeepers on Tuesday, estimated to have been dead for at least 24 hours. Interviews with the families reveal there was a dispute over debts related to an investment, but police are still investigating motives and coordinating with various authorities.
ในส่วนที่เกี่ยวข้องกับสถานทูตสหรัฐอเมริกาเนี่ยเราก็มีการประสานงานกันถ้าได้ข้อมูลทั้งหมดมาแล้วมาวิเคราะห์เนี่ยรวมถึงข้อมูลที่เราจัดชุดร่วมกับนครบาลในการที่ไปไล่ดูกล้องนะครับไปดูเรื่องในสนามบินไปดูเรื่องความสัมพันธ์ในการเดินทางทั้งหมดเนี่ยมันอาจจะทำให้ รายละเอียดทางคดีเนี่ยได้เพิ่มกลับมาในการที่จะมาดำเนินการสืบสวนต่อไปครับก็ขออนุญาตรายงานในเบื้องต้นเท่านี้ครับ
The case has drawn global attention and even warranted a visit from Thailand's Prime Minister Srettha Thasin. Vietnam's government says its embassy in Bangkok is closely coordinating with Thai authorities. The FBI is involved, and the U.S. State Department says it is monitoring the situation.
Whenever a U.S. citizen dies in a foreign country, local authorities are responsible for determining the cause of death. We do reach out to local authorities often to communicate with them when it involves the death of a U.S. citizen, and we will certainly be doing so here.
With the discovery of cyanide, police are now treating this as a murder-suicide and hope to answer the question, why? Chris Ma and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, fraud is taking home ownership further out of reach for young people in Taiwan. Stay tuned to find out why.
Enjoy the rich diversity of Taiwan's independent music. Taiwan Calling, every Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A government probe has found widespread abuse of a program that is meant to help young people buy homes. Those abuses are driving prices up, putting homeownership further out of reach. John Van Trieste reports.
It was supposed to get young people on the property ladder in an unforgiving housing market. A government program offers young buyers preferential interest rates and a longer period to pay off mortgages. But a finance ministry probe found more than 1,500 people breaking the rules between the start of last August and the end of March. And all this rule breaking has instead helped drive prices up even higher. Most of these cases involve buyers secretly renting out their new properties. Some were caught when tenants asked the government for rent subsidies. Officials say these illegal landlords will have their preferential conditions revoked.
有转租的话，马上就会面临停止适用利息优惠这样的风险。我们这边还是会要求银行持续去做好贷后管理的。
But that's not the only trick investigators have uncovered. Over 100 properties bought in a young person's name turned out to be owned by someone else, an investor looking for a good deal. The finance ministry says it will launch another probe to catch more people abusing the system. But housing justice advocates say the probe only looked at a tiny number of the tens of thousands of homes bought under the scheme, and they're skeptical the policy could be effective even if rule breakers are caught.
现在政府他就不肯承认它是错误的一个政策，因为房价很高的状况底下，你用政府纳税人的钱去补贴年轻人买房，其实让他们还更久，风险更高。对，但是这个政策它推升了房价。又让大家有这种对于房市的恐慌性的预期，害怕现在不买，未来买不到。
Other policies may be needed to truly bring housing within the reach of ordinary young people.
把一些层数给下降，它可能是手段之一。货币管制的方式，让银行放贷出去的成本增加，减少他们的一些放款意愿，让市场降温。
Taiwan has some of the world's most unaffordable housing in terms of both prices and average incomes. This is especially true in the big cities like Taipei. And activists to market watchers agree that there are other steps that can and should be taken to give young people a piece of the housing market. Joseph Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Ukraine's power grid operator has announced emergency electricity shutdowns. The country is grappling with Russian strikes on its energy sector and a record heat wave. Rosie Greninger reports.
Children in Kyiv search for a reprieve from the sweltering summer as a record heat wave grips Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians are struggling with temperatures reaching over 34 degrees Celsius, significantly higher than the typical July average of 24 degrees. The heat exacerbated by regular power cuts, leaving residents without air conditioning and forced to adapt in any way they can.
Частенько дітей купаємо, душик. Ну, виходимо в парк таке. А взагалі, ну, світла ж немає майже цілий день, кондиціонери не варіант. Ну, таке, роздягнені ходять, ну, водичку п'ють.
But the relief is only temporary. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukraine's power-generating facilities have become a major target. Russian airstrikes have ravaged the country's energy grid, leading to hours of rolling blackouts. This has led businesses to raise the price for groceries that need refrigeration, and families are left with limited choices.
Ну, це, по-перше, змінилося, що ми дуже обмежено готуємо. По-друге, ми не можемо зберігати довго в холодильнику. І, наприклад, дитячі сирки, вони псуються.
And there is no long-term solution in sight. With its equipment failing, power grid operator Ukrenegro announced emergency electricity shutdowns in 7 of the country's 27 regions. Consumers have been urged to limit their use of appliances to preserve the power grid's capability, a challenging task for many residents.
Я приїхала до України через 2 роки, як я прожила в Німеччині. І мені здається, що я потрапила в Єгипет, бо я не пам'ятаю такої спеки.
And it's only forecast to get worse. With temperatures set to rise further, and Russia continuing its assault on Ukraine and its already crippled power grid, residents are expecting darker days ahead, compounded by more power outages and scorching heat. Patrick Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
A young woman in eastern Taiwan is being tattooed as part of an agonizing indigenous rite of passage. Sandy Chi looks at how these lifelong markings go back generations.
Tap after tap. Luzum Guzaza is enduring hours of pain as she takes part in an important ancient ritual. This is her Kivachi ceremony, a rite of passage in her family and the Paiwan Indigenous community.
我们家族最早是可以追溯到从屏东一个很古老的部落叫巴丹营迁下来的一个家族，然后在台东金轮溪流域这里自己建立起一个部落，所以我们家算是部落中的部落领袖。
To get this tattoo, ink is hammered into the skin using a chisel and a striking stick. It's an ancient traditional application, and one that's far more painful than those performed with modern tattoo guns. But for Luzum Guzaza, it's worth it. The tattoo will last a lifetime and taps into centuries of tradition. When it's done, it will earn her the right to lead her family in Taimali village in southeastern Taiwan's Taidong County.
在你要接头目位置之前，你一定要做完手纹。做完手纹，未来你就可以慢慢的、顺利的去接他爸爸的位置。然后在整个纹身的过程中是很重要的，尤其是他被纹身的痛，他会慢慢去体会到纹身结束。
This method is part of a sacred tradition for Taiwan's indigenous Paiwan community, where the intricate patterns are thought to connect people to their ancestors. For years, the tattoos were a cultural identifier for Taiwan's indigenous groups, and one that the Japanese worked to stamp out during colonial rule.
就是禁止纹身，不漂亮。他们说不漂亮，然后变到最后就变成会把这个纹身的
80 years after Japan's departure, Tujui Patires is the last artist in Taiwan carrying on the tradition. He taught himself the technique by studying Paiwan culture and the methods used by indigenous Maori tattooists in New Zealand. Tujui Patires and Luzum Guzaza's family talked for months. They dug deep into their past to decide what symbols and patterns to go with. Inspiration came from Luzum Guzaza's grandmother, who died years ago, the last person in the family to receive the tattoos.
这次比较属于我们家族的图腾，就是人形纹跟太阳纹会跟其他家族有区隔。我们的不一样的地方就是人形纹下面这里有一个像山的图形， 就是人行尾下面有站着一个山，因为我们部落叫 Vuki 的，它是在很深山的一个地方。
All of Luzum Guzaza's family have gathered on this day, dressed in their traditional attire to witness her keep the tradition alive.
这是女性成长最重要的一个过程，它表示可以承接传宗接代的责任，另一方面也代表她的贞洁。再其次是，通常是希望有贵族的家族能够把他们自己属于家族的纹路、图案，透过文手传言下去。
For Luzum Guzaza, becoming her family's next leader and taking part in this ancient tradition is about identity.
当我把纹身纹在手上，我也是很直接的跟人家阐述我自己的身份是什么，所以眼光跟压力一定会更多。但是就是今天这个仪式有让我感受到说有这些压力，但是我身边还是有很多人陪着我。
Now imprinted with tattoos that will last a lifetime, Luzum Guzaza is prepared to shoulder the responsibilities of leadership. When she takes the helm, she'll look the part while carrying on traditions that span generations and go much further than skin deep. Alex Chen and Zanny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us tonight on TaiwanPlus News. Grab our app to get more of our reports on the go. Finally, let's take a look at the annual census of the swans on the River Thames in England. They are all considered property of the monarch, and they've been counting the birds for 8 centuries. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. We'll see you next time.